Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
I'm Victoria Cash. Thanks for calling the Lucky Land Hotline. If you feel like you do the same thing every day, press 1. If you're ready to have some serious fun for the chance to redeem some serious prizes, press 2. We heard you loud and clear. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com right now and play over 100 social casino-style games for free. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
What happens when we choose to believe? We notice the small things, a sparkle in the eye or the sound of a laugh. At Children's Nebraska, believing allows us to deliver a better care experience for kids. One where physicians are fluent in cardiology and cartoons, where medicine heals with the help of music, and where those who draw blood also draw a smile. See what it means to believe in better at childrensnebraska.org/believe.
The biggest and best in the world. Not many companies or organisations globally can claim to host an event that is described exactly like that. That is, apart from our guest in this episode of Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. I'm Michael.
And I'm John, and this is the series where we talk to the men and women behind the scenes of sport in the UK. So after Paris 2024 this summer, and in fact after every summer, there's always the 13.1 mile route from Newcastle to South Shields to look forward to. But, as we're about to find out, the Great North Run is only the start of it.
I'm Paul Foster. I'm the Chief Executive of the Great Run Company.
Paul, we will come on to talk about all of the events that your business, your organisation does. But let's start with the Great North Run. There is not many finer sights in sport, is there, than 60,000 people coming across the Tyne Bridge and the red arrows overhead. It is just one of those quintessential British sporting occasions now.
Well, thanks very much for giving it such a good description. Yeah, you know, the Great North Run is an iconic race. I'm confident to say that, even though it's our event to organise, because it just captures a really great spirit of the Northeast and projects that around the world because of the people who take part in it. But we're lucky that we've got the Tyne Bridge. We're lucky that we've got the red arrows, but we're lucky we've got 45 years of amazing history for the race as well.
And you are the CEO of the Great Run Company. Have you done the race?
I've run the race a few times when I was a bit younger. I like to use the excuse nowadays that I'm too busy on the day to actually run it. To be fair, I think if I really wanted to, I should lace up and get around it. But yeah, I've run the race a few times back in the day and just loved it.
And Samo, we saw last year finishing his competitive career with yourselves. Can you give us a hint of what we might expect this year?
Well, I think this year, we've been lucky to be blessed with Mo Farah as the world's greatest athlete for such a long time, and he's got big shoes to fill. But this year, I think we're looking at to see what happens at the Olympic Games. We always try an Olympic year to get those gold medalists from those 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters races, sometimes a marathon. But we'll be chasing those guys around Paris. They're a bit quicker than me, to be fair. But if we can catch up with them, we'll be looking to put some Olympic heroes into the race. But what you can expect this year is the Great North Run in all its glory. You know, we've seen more demand for this race than ever before, and we're expecting. We sold out our entries as we always do, but demand for the ballot was very, very high. We're expecting more people than ever to show up on the start line, and I think it'll be a fantastic day.
Because it must be hard year in, year out to keep that momentum going. No pun intended with Mo Farah.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I mean, the elite race is part of the sort of DNA of the Great North Run. You know, we've been lucky to see some of the very best athletes that the world's ever seen come and take part in the race. But that's only a part of it. We work really hard every year to try and create narratives, create stories, but really most of that comes from the people who are taking part themselves. We just have the most amazing participants and their stories, whether they're running for world records or whether they're running just to get around for the first time, and everything in between. Those people, those participants, those are telling extraordinary stories, and when we just tap into that and try and give a platform to whatever people are trying to talk about, whatever they're fundraising for, and we try and find the best stories and tell those stories.
It must be a huge partnership to stage something like the Great North Run. I'm thinking it starts in Newcastle, goes through Gateshead, finishes in South Shields. There's 3 local authorities there just to start with.
Absolutely. And I mean, the interesting thing about the Great North Run is we never actually got permission to stage the race. If you go back to 1981, Brendan, my father, was establishing the race and had this idea that we're going to run from Newcastle to South Shields. And he wrote to the local police at that point and said, I'm thinking of organising a fun run across the Tyne Bridge. Would the police support it? And the letter he got back said it's public policy not to close roads for these types of events. However, if you choose to go ahead with the race, we can see what happens. And there was never any formal permission in those days, and it's gone from there. And really, we work really closely with those local authorities. They're really good partners of ours, but they understand all the benefits of the race, both for their residents and the people of the Northeast, for the image and perception of the Northeast around the country and around the world. And the race generates, huge amounts of fundraising for charities, both local and national, and a significant economic impact. We see people from every postcode in Great Britain come to the Northeast for that event. You can't get a hotel between Berwick and York. And it really is it's a great day. So we enjoy a really strong relationship with those local authorities. They're key partners. It's a complicated race to organise, but we do know how to do it. We've done it a few times, and so each year we're dusting down the blueprints and trying to improve things. But we really enjoy our relationship with those politicians and council executives across the region.
What's your first memory of the race then? Because I presume it's been ever present in your life.
Yeah, and I mean, the first race I was 4 years old when I took part, and it was in the summer in those days. It was held in June, and my earliest and vague memories of it are of taking an open-top bus from the start to the finish. Every year, my father ran the first race, at least maybe a couple of them. So my mum and my sister and I and some of the other kind of kids of the organisers would jump on this bus. It was a good fun day out. I remember sitting on the grass at South Shields in the blazing sunshine. And South Shields was quite different in those days. There was a great big colliery just at the end of the finish there, and sitting and remember looking at the shadow of that and asking to go down to the beach because we'd had enough of watching people run across the line. I also remember in the very early days, my mum at home helping sort out the results of the Great North Run, because obviously there was no electronic timing in those days. You tore a little strip off your race number and put it on a spike, and then they'd all come off the spikes and get handwritten down onto a great big chart. And then about 2 weeks later, the newspaper would print the results, and sometimes they'd print them in a little add-on kind of magazine. So I remember all of that from those early days, and it's a bit like getting old in front of a mirror, right? You look back at the pictures from 1981 and they look very different. The runners look very different. The camera angles are the same, that iconic shot of the Great North Run, but year on year, it just changes that little bit, which you can't really tell from year on year until you start looking back. But we want to keep developing the race going forward. We're looking forward to a 50th race in 1981. Sorry, in 2031. And that's kind of a focus of where we're looking at now.
Michael mentioned at the start, Paul, that it's the biggest and best half marathon in the world, and it bookends the summer in my eyes growing up, and still does. And you've got that relationship with the London Marathon in April and you guys in the autumn.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we love the London Marathon. We work closely with them on a number of projects, as we may get onto. The London Marathon is the most amazing race, and the demand for their ballot this year was over 800,000 people, which is just remarkable, and shows how much people want to take part, not just in marathons, but in iconic events. And I think in those two races, you've probably got as strong a pair of racers as anywhere in the world.
Now, of course, we spoke to you just a few episodes ago when you launched with London Marathon and British Athletics, the Athletics Ventures scheme, company, which is about making sure that Britain continues to stage world-class athletics events. Where are we in this country with the state of athletics, and are we back on the right track after maybe taking a step backwards in the last few years?
I think it's been challenging times for athletics globally. The sport has, in my opinion, struggled to evolve in the backdrop of behemoths like the Premier League and the FIFA and UEFA products, which have really come to dominate a huge part of the landscape. And I'm sure that's a topic that you guys cover a lot on Anything But Footy. I think the global sport of athletics does need to evolve. I don't see tearing up the kind of rule books and reinventing the sport from the fundamentals. I firmly believe that when athletics is packaged correctly, when it's certainly in Great Britain, when the time zone for an international championships is in primetime TV, we enjoy brilliant support from the BBC for the sport in general. And when you see Budapest in 2023, for example, and you see the kind of impact that Katarina Johnson-Thompson or Josh Kerr can make on the British sporting audience, there's a fantastic support for the sport. It's a simple sport to understand. We all remember, it's a long time ago now, 12 years, but we remember Super Saturday at the London Olympics. We remember the performances of Usain Bolt, and going back, Michael Johnson. Now, I don't want to hark on about the past, but when that sport is targeted at the right audience at the right time, it really resonates. And I think that's what we want to try and get back a little bit. My opinion on the Diamond League, it's an event that doesn't quite work for its audience. And I think quite a lot of global athletics needs to re-engage with its audiences. And we know John Ridgeon and Seb Coe, and we work closely with them on lots of different things. And I know that they are trying to innovate the sport. They've had a lot of kind of work to do in the background. But I think in Great Britain, we've got the Paris Olympics coming up, and we've got some fantastic opportunities for medals there. But I'm really excited about the European champs in Birmingham in 2026. I think European Championships has never been staged in Great Britain before. And that's surprising to me because it's an event that is delivered in primetime TV. I'm sure it'll be on the BBC, and we'll have a fantastic gold medal opportunity every single night. There'll be a packed stadium in Birmingham, and that's the kind of event that really cuts through and really resonates. And I'm sure that with opportunities like that, we've got an opportunity to try and build the sport back up again in the UK. But fundamentally, I genuinely believe that when the audience can see it, it creates great stories, great heroes, and a really diverse audience from kids to adults from all backgrounds just really engage and get it. And I think we can work on that.
We're speaking to Paul Foster, the CEO of the Great Run Company. This is Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. So we've mentioned Athletics Ventures, the new company, the partnership with British Athletics and London Marathon. Where are we a few weeks on from the kind of official announcement of the venture?
We are working hard towards the Diamond League, which is a couple of months away. Ticket sales are going really, really well. It's certainly going to be the biggest single day of athletics in the world this year. We've got the sort of small matter of the Paris Olympics, which will probably trump us. But, it'll be a fantastic one-day meeting. We've got some big names announced and more to come. And that's sort of the first kind of step. The second bit of it is the long road to Birmingham 2026. There's a lot of work to do to organise that major championships, and that has already started. We spent quite a lot of time in Birmingham already, and our strategies for marketing and ticketing and our kind of operational work is well underway on that. We're in the market for sponsorship, and that's an area that's going to be vital for the success of this partnership. We got some very interesting conversations. We're looking at the sort of medium term for the next couple of years, but it's our job now to present that to partners in a compelling way and try and build that cross athletics package that we think is really attractive. And we've got some really interesting brands having some really interesting conversations about coming on board as long-term partners to help build that. So I think the jigsaw is still on the table, being sorted out. There's a lot of work to do to put it together, and there's lots of different pieces.
And the practicalities of Athletics Ventures, have you put a bespoke separate team together? Have you got an MD, for example, that's leading from the front?
Yeah, well, we've got a leadership team formed from myself and Jack and Hugh, and we've appointed a chief operating officer who's going to pull together the various threads. And we're building these project teams up in the same way that the Great Run Company or London Marathon events organise, a dozen events a year. We see these as additional events. They've got slightly different stakeholders, but we're in the first instance populating those teams from the staff of London Marathon, from Great Run, and from UK Athletics. And then we'll start supplementing that, particularly for Birmingham, as we build to bigger teams and more full-time work on it.
Well, we wish you all the success with that. On the Great Run, Paul, it's not just about the North, is it? It's not just about the London Marathon that we talked about earlier. It's right across the country now. How many races do you put on? And is it every weekend?
No, we focused in post-pandemic years on the biggest races in our portfolio. We feel like there's a very busy market out there for participation running, and there's lots of events that happen very, very regularly. If you go back 10, 15 years, if you and I, John, wanted to run a 10K together, we'd first of all have to do a bit of training, but we would have to sort of say, right, let's do for example, the Great Manchester Run, and we'd keep that weekend free and we build towards it. If we have that conversation today, we can say, when are we free? And we can find a race. There's lots of opportunities to do that, and there's lots and lots of smaller events. So we've focused on what we do best, which is delivery of the biggest and best events, which are standout experiences. We're going to see 30,000 people in Manchester this year, which will be the biggest race we've staged for almost a decade in Manchester. We just sold out the Great Bristol Run with 20,000, which was the biggest Great Bristol Run ever. So we focused on events in Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, Portsmouth, Newcastle, in the Great Run series, where we see that we are the biggest, the landmark event in that area. And we complement these smaller, more frequent races. But this is where we bring huge activations. We've got big sponsor portfolios, live television in the case of Manchester, which will be on BBC One on Sunday, and in the case of the Great North Run. And so we're trying to target that premium, like big experience, that bucket list event kind of must do. So we focused on that for the Great Run series. And that's where we've seen demand this year, particularly really, really high. This year, we will sell out every Great Run event. And that hasn't happened for a long time, if ever, certainly before my time at the business. And there is a running boom right now. I've already spoken about the ballot entries for the London Marathon, which is obviously the pinnacle of it, but ballot entries for the Great North Run were a 25% record on previous years, on any previous year. But we're, like I say, going to sell out the whole of the Great Run series, which we've never done before. And that's speaking to the kind of culture of health and well-being and fitness that we're seeing. We're particularly seeing an increase in entries from under 30s. And outside of the Great Run bubble, we're seeing lots of really interesting new events springing up, which are free or very cheap to enter, which have no timing, no race numbers, no measured course, and are opportunities for people to get together and run, which is really where the Great North Run came from in the first place, is that idea that running is better when you run together. And we're offering that opportunity to run together with tens of thousands of people. And this year it's really attractive, and we're really looking forward to staging these massive events for people. But yeah, it's up and down the country, and across the whole country, we're seeing a real return to, or even growth on pre-pandemic levels of participation.
Brings me on to my final question, Paul, to be fair, because I thought 10 years ago that cycling was going to take over from running in this country. It felt like a huge boom of cycling. That seems to have slowed down slightly, and running has come back. Is that just cyclical? And does that mean that also, and I know one of the ideas of your father was to make sure that you had brilliant British runners competing at these events. Actually, do you think it's cyclical that we will have another Mo Farah in 5 or 6 years' time who will dominate?
I think running is basically an ever present. I think, you're right about the cycling boom, and I'll come on to that very briefly in a moment. But if you look at participation levels in running, they've always remained high. The biggest events were, as I've said, one of the fewer opportunities to run in those kinds of races. There's lots of them now. There are many, many more events today than there were 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And many more people taking part. And if you include parkrun in that, then it really is off the charts. I think cycling had a very unique moment in its around 2010, 11, 12. You had huge investment from Sky, who had cycling. You look at Sky's marketing budget, which dwarfs any budget in sport itself. And they were putting cycling front and center. I could tell a similar story about swimming with British Gas around the Olympic Games, where you had Rebecca Adlington and Kerry-Anne Payne on the side of vans in every street in every town. And you had unbelievable characters in Bradley Wiggins and Mark Cavendish who would stand out in any sport. We had a real peak of investment, of performance, and bike sales were through the roof. But what I think happened in participation is that if you look at mass participation cycling, it's extremely challenging. For the Great North Run, we closed 13.1 miles of roads, and that costs a huge amount of money to organise the logistics of that event. If you take Ride London, for example, which is really the kind of sole survivor in that market, you're closing 100 miles of roads, plus you're closing a lot of roads to be the kind of plan B roads for when diversions are necessary. It's operationally super challenging. And really the only organisation with the resources to do so is the London Marathon Events Company. And they're able to leverage a huge database and the London audience and the charity audience to make that race a success. But I think for other smaller operators, and there's been a few have fallen by the wayside, it's really hard. So I think running's been ever present, and I think things will orbit around that. But when you break it down, the simplest way of getting fit and healthy, and the simplest way of participating in an event like a mass participation event, is to go for a run.
Final question then, Paul. Great North Run. Let's finish where we started. I've done it. You've done it. What are you going to say to get John to do it?
I would say to John, and you've been there, right? I'd say to John, stand at the finish line and watch them come over. Okay, the first few hundred athletes, you're never going to get anywhere near them. The next few thousand athletes, they're probably out of your league as well. But then if you look at, there's tens of thousands of people crossing the line and watch them finishing, talk to them, ask them how they feel, ask them how they've done, ask them again a week later. There's nobody who can't run the Great North Run, who can't take part in the Great North Run, if they really want to do so and if they really put their mind to it. It is a challenge. The training is a commitment. It'll hurt on the day, but you'll be so happy you did it afterwards. And there's 100,000 spectators out there to keep you going along the route. I think if you're going to run one race in your lifetime, it should be the Great North Run. And we'll have an entry ready for you, John, anytime.
Talk about pressure. Paul Foster, CEO of the Great Run Company. Thank you so much for talking to Great British Bosses.
Thank you.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.